Okay, so today we're going to talk about stillness and meditation. There's a lot of different approaches. Some traditions emphasize more effort than others do. Some emphasize quite a bit of effort in the beginning, actually. They call it the section of the training that has to do with taming the mind. And they use the analogy of having an elephant or having a horse tied to a rope. And by having that initial pole and the rope that's tied to the horse, you gradually bring the mind under control, and you keep it contained. So some of the approaches employ various levels of effort to have stillness or silence arise. Of the effort approaches, one of them, for example, is practicing not talking to yourself, like actually setting aside time, either in meditation or outside of meditation, where every time you notice internal talk, you relax, or you actually have the sense of just not engaging in internal talk. So it can be from effort, or it can be from relaxation. The way that I teach and the specific approach that we've all done is to really just relax, and in that relaxation and in that release, we'll notice that there isn't any internal dialogue that's happening. Once a little bit of the tension arises and the mind wanders a little bit, then we notice some proliferating internal talk arises. The approaches that use effort, I feel, are more suitable to retreat conditions and people who live in retreat conditions. I think there's a kind of stillness and quietness that's already inherent in some of those environments, and that's very useful. But for those of us, or for the rest of us that live in society and have jobs and have many things to do, that effort can become very tiresome. Because how it works is, it's like boiling water. You turn the effort on, and if you keep the effort sustained for long enough, eventually there's a cessation of thinking. It's like you watch the mind for long enough, you observe for long enough, you put effort into noticing everything that you're doing for long enough, and then eventually the water starts boiling and there's a cessation of the internal commentary. A lot easier when you're on a meditation retreat. But for being outside of a meditation retreat, I think the approach and the way of naturalness is much more realistic and much more effective, so that we're not continuously, so that we don't have the sense that we're always trying to build something, or they're always trying to maintain something, and that we're always trying to get somewhere in our practice, because that can become pretty tiresome. The truth is that our experience and experience itself, reality is always immediate. You never get more reality. You never get less reality. You never get more experience of this or less of it. It's just this. So sure, like various qualities could be increased, vibrancy, you could have the flavors of awakening, non-duality, whatever it is, but it's still experience. It's still phenomena. So even if this body disappears and there's an ocean of 10 billion suns and it's clear light, there's still knowingness. There's still form. It's just not the room. It's not me. It's not the laptop. It's an radiant light of 10 billion suns, but it's still form. So the form and emptiness are always inseparable. Experience is continuous. It's if we're going to talk about what's happening in terms of time, if we're going to talk about things in relative and in relation to time, Experience is continuous, it's ever present, it's never ending. So noticing experience and noticing reality, I'm using reality and experience as the same thing here, synonymous terms. That's a very natural approach. You're just noticing what already is, what's here, what's always been here, what always will be here, which is experience. So noticing that, releasing, relaxing, these are, it's like it's so easy, you almost think it's stupid. Like it's so easy that your mind thinks like it can't be that simple. Like it just can't. Like it has to be some kind of advanced thing or some special technique. But when it comes down to it, it really is that simple. It's as simple as just noticing. So in the context of using meditation techniques, Dhammakaya meditation, mindfulness of breathing, body awareness, whatever it is, you're initially taught that some effort can be applied, or maybe even some places a lot of effort can be applied. So in different parts of Thailand, they teach it that way. It just gives you a headache. So it gives you a headache, but if you keep pushing, you keep pushing, you keep going for it, eventually like the mind just submits to the will, and stillness and whatever it is can begin to unfold. But noticing our experience is fine just as it is. So seeing the meditation object in the center of the body and just noticing the object resting there, those few words are sufficient for the entirety of the meditation. Just noticing that it's there, or just noticing, period. That constitutes meditation. Most of the time, we're not noticing. We're on autopilot, we're distracted, or our mind's in many different directions, dealing with the objects of the external world. So there's not a lot of time for noticing, not a lot of time for listening, not a lot of time for feeling, for understanding things very directly in those modes of direct perception, which is noticing. When you're noticing a feeling, when you're noticing the object at the center of the body, when you're noticing phenomena, this is directly encountering reality, directly encountering experience. It's experiencing experience. Reality experiencing itself. It's not something that I told you. What I'm telling you is completely different than how it is when you actually engage this, when you actually are noticing. When I give you information, or when you read it from a book, or when you hear it from a teacher, it's conceptual. But when you're directly tending to experience, when you're directly noticing what's happening in the body or in the mind, in the sensate fields, that's all direct. This is not conceptual. This is not philosophical. It's philosophical after the fact, once we start talking about it. But when we actually do it, it's extremely direct. So in using a meditation object, placing the Dhamma sphere, the meditation sphere, at the center of the body, just resting, noticing. That's it. So oftentimes meditation is taught like this. I got this from Adyashanti, and it's a really good analogy. So normally our mind is like this. It's closed. When we do meditation, or when we sit for meditation, or when we go on a walk and we're just mindfully walking, or whatever it is, we allow the mind to just open up like this. We open to experience. We notice what is, and we notice what's happening. We're in noticing. You're noticing. The mind wanders. It goes into some thought or some external perception, captures attention. And suddenly there's some tension. And then you relax again, and you're noticing again. So meditation is just a process of opening, again and again and again and again and again until you remain open for the majority of the meditation. And if you're a meditation master, then you're open. You're never not open. You're open continuously forever. So in the noticing of experience, at least that's my assumption. Actually, I'm assuming that. I've heard that from teachers, but I've never actually experienced it for myself. This like forever continuous noticing, continuous presence. But that being said, experience itself is continuous either way. If we were aware of something, if awareness was there, it means that we'll remember it. So the experiences that we've had in our life, we remember that those things happened. There was awareness that was there, obviously. What's different about awareness in the context of meditation is that there's recognition of awareness. There's recognition, there's actual noticing of experience that is happening, as opposed to where our lives were 10 years ago or before we became practitioners. Of course, we would say that we were conscious. Of course, we would say that we were sentient and that our mind was there because we remember all of it. But it's not the same as the actual recognition of mind, recognition of awareness and of experience that happens in meditation and that happens in path. It's not like you discover something new, in the sense that the mind always had the capacity for recognition. But if you look back before a certain date, there's like just no recognition before that point. So if anyone's done meditation or had some kind of spiritual awakening, there's usually, oftentimes it's like an awareness awakens. That's why it's called awakening. And that can happen through meditation, through meeting a teacher, through some traumatic experience in life, other people, plant medicine, whatever it is. But there's a kind of like the lights turn on in consciousness. And it's not that the light wasn't there, like the light was always there. There just wasn't recognition of it. So recognition is really the difference. And there's so many different names for that word or for that concept of recognition. It could be called prajna, paramita, perfection of wisdom, nature of mind, mahamudra, which is the great seal. But these are all terms for reality and for the recognition of mind, of reality, of experience. These are inseparable. They're actually one thing. We initially think that our mind is in here and that experience is out here, but that's a misperception that is cleared up on the path. For stillness, for meditation, there's a this is it. Like, if you want to understand stillness, if you want to understand why people meditate, this is it right here. If you empty yourself of desire, of wanting, you just let it go. You just release it. You just notice without trying, without moving, without doing, without attempting, without controlling, without deliberation, without intention. You just notice. It's like boom, stillness is there. So what's happening is that the wanting to get still, the wanting for our experience to be different, the wanting to have things be different than how they are, the wanting to have a specific spiritual awakening, the wanting to get to a particular place in life or in our spiritual development, all of that wanting keeps the mind going. It literally possesses the energy. The wanting is the energy that keeps the machinations of thought in process, in operation, continuously moving. This is the whole point of asceticism, actually. This is the whole point of becoming a recluse or going into the mountains or going on a journey, is that when a person retreats from the world and from from themselves, actually, at least what they think that is. The wanting that goes into our everyday activities and goes into sustaining our personality structure, that wanting is released by going into an environment like that. Like it's not the cave. The cave is not special, or the retreat center is not special, or taking a year off actually to find yourself is not special. It's what it does. It's what that environment and what that internal process entails that's special. When you go and do something like that, you put yourself in an environment where that that movement of wanting and desire is not as strong and can gradually die down. So most people, or a lot of, maybe I can't say most, but a lot of people can't do this without leaving the world. So when I have reviewed people on my podcast, I see it again and again and again. There's this period where they leave. So like Tina Rasmussen, Don Berry, Don did a 4-month retreat. Tina did a year long. I've done 9 months, right? So it's not that this applies to every single person or that every person needs to do this. Like if you could just have your normal job and just keep noticing and do all the things that you normally do, but not the noticing is not impeded, and that clinging and craving is not accumulating to such a great degree, then you're fine. You don't need to do a retreat. You're okay in life just as it is. But if you know that you engage in quite a bit of activity and the mind's going a lot, and you need to have a lot of desire to keep your life sustained, then unless there's an integration with that, and that desire and that energy is taken onto the path, there could be this sense that's like just have too much going on to really get still and get quiet. So a lot of people feel that, and that's why they go and do retreats when they have time, or they dedicate a weekend or a day once a month or a day once a week where they shut off their phone and they don't do anything. Actually giving yourself time to do nothing is important. This is really essential for this practice and for all meditation as well. If you actually give yourself time to like just go sit in that corner or sit in your car, don't do anything and don't want anything. Don't even want to not want, right? You got that's a whole nother game. You're like, you want to not want. It's not that. You just notice. You just notice. Like there's even movement in the surrender. Like even the surrender is actually trying to get something. So to actually set aside time for not trying to get anything at all, not trying to modify, I mean, completely natural, pure noticing. Letting the mind, the body, the heart, everything be in a natural state. If you can do that in your regular life, bravo, because I wasn't able to do that. I had to go and do retreats. It just wasn't possible. So setting aside time to literally just sit there and not experience want, or even if want comes up, not to follow it, but to just notice. Desires, impulses arise, just notice them. Even the impulse to not react, noticing that. Just notice. Notice all experience. Notice. Giving yourself time to actually not have to want, to not have to think, to not have to do, to not have to become, to not have to try, to not have to create. This is like when you hear this, some of you are like, this is crazy. Like what is that even like? The experience is primarily characterized by all of those things. I mean, that's all that I know life and existence to be. So the idea of setting aside time to just notice all of that, and to actually rest in this. I don't even like using the term giving up, because that implies that you're dropping something, but just to notice and not have to give rise to all the things that I mentioned. So not have to give rise to internal dialogue. It's still going to come up for sure. You'll still notice that you're talking to yourself, but what happens is you set aside an hour to do this. You sit down in a corner on a chair, open eyes, closed eyes, and you just notice that because you're noticing thought, because you're noticing experience, there's less internal dialogue. So initially, I may be talking to myself like, I need to go to the market. I miss my friend. I never have that thought. No, I need to read this book. Or I need to go here. I need to go there. So you're having complete sentences of internal dialogue. But what happens is by just noticing, by being in noticing, by noticing experience, instead of having attention be completely absorbed in it, those thought sentences will get shorter. So you're actually, in a way, practicing not talking to yourself as much. So initially, you'll say like 20 sentences within a given period of time, and then it'll be shorter, 10 sentences, shorter, 5 sentences. And then you'll notice that the mind is creating like half sentences. Like, I'm trying to get to, and then it just stops. I need to, I am, I, and then silence, just silence before it picks up again. And then it repeats. So this is what can happen. And it's natural, of course, it's natural to talk to ourselves, it's natural to think. That's the basis of, that's just how life functions. And it's not that thought is actually thought itself. There's this tendency, for example, some teachers, like even just from what I'm teaching, you can get the impression it's like, oh, maybe I need to not think as much. I'm just telling you that there's a way to experience or have experience arise in such a way that there's not as much internal dialogue. But thought itself, thought flashes, these are all manifestations of the empty nature of mind. There's nothing in them that needs to be rejected. There's nothing in them that needs to be embraced. They arise, they pass. They're actually the manifestations of the infinite potentiality of empty presence of mind, appear magically and then disappear magically. So there's nothing to reject about thought, and particularly in Mahayana and in the Mahamudra tradition, for example, thought is actually integrated into presence and seen as manifestation of presence, and becomes fuel for the continuity of presence and mindfulness, like a fire. All sensation, all thought, all experience being fuel for this presence and recognition, noticing of experience, like a feedback loop or fuel for a fire. So you could play with some of the ideas that I've mentioned here. If you've noticed, I never give homework assignments or any particular instructions that I keep tabs with you on. I just throw some ideas out there, and if they seem prevalent to you, then I recommend that you go and try them. But more than getting used to not talking to yourself, or at least experimenting with not talking to yourself, the more important point of this whole discussion was being able to rest completely free of want. Being able to just notice the center of the body without craving, without clinging, without this need to control or have our experience be a certain way. And when we can just notice, and in meditation particularly, we're noticing while smiling. It's like the harmony of just leaving things as they are, just the harmony of everything as it is, really becomes recognized and prominent. It can feel almost as if our need to move things around and shift things around and adapt this and adapt that, it can be perceived as being so gross, not in the disgusting sense, but I mean in the coarse sense, as opposed to the serenity of just letting everything be. Letting everything be, controlling or modifying things or having intention, these are both aspects of experience. There's not, I'm not saying that somehow intention is like worse than letting everything be or non-intention. Both of these are mind. Both of these are manifestations of mind. So in a way, they're both perfected in their own inherent nature. But in terms of the actual practice of the meditation, you may have the experience of feeling that trying to control and having intention is just a little, it's just a little too much. It's just easier to just notice and rest. But this moves into a discussion that we can do next week, or I can carry on from what we covered here. It's like there's this difference between speech and silence, or like what we think is a difference between speech and silence. So you go onto a meditation retreat and you're totally silent, and you come out of a meditation retreat and you start talking. And initially we think that like the silence is pure and that somehow speech is impure. And these are totally, those, like that concept is just an absolute fabrication. There's nothing inherently purer about silence than there is about speech. They're both just modes of perception and of reality. They're like two sides of the same coin, and in Buddhist terms, the coin is illusory. So you could say both speech and silence are empty. They're relative. So we'll cover this in the next one, like the balance between intention and letting go. This is a big subject for a lot of us spiritually oriented people. When do we intend? When do we put effort into something? When do we have to assert ourselves? And when do we recede and wait and sit and surrender? You can't always do one. If you recede in a situation where you need to be assertive, consequences can be dire. If you are assertive in a situation where you need to wait and recede, the outcome could also be unfavorable. So we'll touch on that next week, and we can begin the meditation now. I was talking a lot and pretty fast, so for the next 4 minutes, we'll just be silent, and then you'll hear my voice 5:31, and then we'll go from there. I'm gonna go sit down on the cushion, but the lighting here was better, so I kept it here. But so I'm gonna turn off my screen, and we'll begin. But the meditation will begin as of now.